On a fact, to just keep it simple, just
March, is this a new idea?
Okay, good morning to everyone. I'd just like to welcome you all and open the April meeting for the council. One Sunny sick, Amanda's come up to the front table. So opening, and we are live streaming with the live streaming statement. Every member of the council wishing to advise members of the public council meetings will be recorded and will be available after each meeting on the council website. All care will be taken to maintain the privacy of those in attendance. However, as a visitor in the public gallery or presence, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is assumed you have given consent in the event your image is broadcast. This includes any filming by television cameras, if in attendance, is approved by the General Manager or Mayor. Item 3 is acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge that we're here today on the land of the Wamba Pareffa people. I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to past Aboriginal elders, the present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who reside within this area and their future generations. Item 4 on the agenda is the statement of purpose. I am come here as a councillor freely and without bias to represent the views of the community in considering matters before us today, and to vote in a matter I consider to be in the best interest of the community, and to observe the code of conduct and respect the rule of the chair and the views of my fellow councillors. We've got full contingency here, so we've got no apologies. Minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated, dated of March. Someone like to move that they be received? Wallace, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Betts. Any questions or comments on them? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Disclosure of interest forms should have been done. There's no mayoral minutes, and item 9 is reports of committee. There is minutes of the Audit Risk Committee Improvement 9.1 held on the 3rd of December, and also we do those individually or
you can move me what?
Yeah, and also the minutes of the Audit Risk Committee for the 1st of April.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor McCrabb, seconded by Councillor Metcalfe. Any questions or comments on those minutes?
Wait.
All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 10. To the reports on meetings for the Mayor and Councillors for the month of March.
No comment. This is a monthly meeting to allow the community and councillors to see the kinds of meetings that have been attended by councillors and executive team members.
Mr. Mayor, can I table mine? I've got some to add to the
We can
list.
add those to the minutes, yes. Belinda will look after that. Any other comments on those?
Yes.
Councillor Wallace.
Mr. Mayor, could you please put me in for the Cemetery Advisory Committee on the 4th of March, not the Mayor?
Oh, well picked up.
And the 25th of March, I was attended the MMZ Liaison Committee. Bushfire.
Right.
Probably my fault for not telling Belinda.
Duly noted. Any other comments, questions? Someone like to move the recommendation that we note those meetings attended? Councillor Betts moved, seconded by Councillor Ball. No further questions or comments? All those in favour?
No.
Yes, carried. Item 10.2 is resolutions of council.
Similar to this one, Mr. Mayor, is a monthly tracking of the resolutions that council has made and progress towards them. So obviously the recommendation is for council to note the resolutions.
All right, the recommendations there, moved by Councillor McCrabb. No. Got a question? You fire right.
For you, Mr Mayor, page 32, resolution 2021-19 regarding the senior living precinct. Dot point 5 about delegating the general manager to apply for funding, and it's a 50-50 dollar for dollar basis, but there's no mention of or any indication that I've seen or had previously about how much that's likely to be.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, the application has gone through the Building Better Regions Fund with an application for $1.5 million for a total project stage cost of $3 million. So we've applied for that and haven't received any information back at this stage as to how it's progressing. But the reason why the monetary value wasn't put into the recommendation and hence adopted by council is we're still working out the detailed costings, and we've given councillors verbally an indication of that. So it's between 3 and 4 million will be first stage.
So will that then come back to council for a resolution regarding the actual borrowing of that money?
Yes, dot point number 6 in the resolution talks about coming back to council for a decision by 30th of June.
Thank you.
That's Wallace.
Can we make a decision? Aren't we in caretaker then?
No, caretaker starts in August.
Starts in August, so you'd have to do it in July meeting or have an extraordinary meeting before August. Because I think it's the 4th of August is when we go again.
Yeah.
But it's all
We're on
dependent on
holidays.
getting the 1.5 from the Building Better. Thank you.
We haven't got a move for a second, have we?
No.
Yeah, I've just got a question on one of the Barham Road site. Now, that's 5 months since we've had the initial letter from the tax legal. Where are we at with that?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we've just received another letter back from Dax Legal
Oh,
for it, so it's been something that council put its position through council solicitors back to them, and we've only just received a response back from them, so it wasn't taken some time. It's been with them in terms of progressing.
And is their response still positive, wanting to buy the land?
Their response has been just reiterating information around where they saw the agreements originally and what their understanding of that was. So they'll continue to be the discussions with them about council wanting to use that land operationally, as well as discuss with council with the site for the STP and how that will impact their development.
One more, sorry,
Okay.
Mr Mayor. Bottom of page 34, just regarding the rent assistance for the Crossing Cafe. It's expected completion date was 2021, and it just hasn't, not sure that it's been resolved, or it's certainly not closed.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll take that on notice, Councillor Craig.
Okay.
Any other questions? Someone like to move the recommendation that we note the information of the resolution? Councillor Fogarty, seconded by Councillor McCrabb. Further questions or comments?
Just
Councillor Hall.
quickly, on page 36 of the sale and development of lots 33, 34, 35, 36, are we able to get an update of that, or do we have to go to confidential to talk about that?
Through Mr Mayor, be preference to go into confidential for that. I'm happy to give a verbal update.
Thank you.
Any other further comments or questions? Moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. 10.3, the investment services report.
I'm happy to move.
Moved by Councillor McCrabb. You got a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Paul, would you like to make any comments about it? No? All right. Any questions from Amanda?
Doesn't seem like it's heated. Hasn't made a comment.
Silence is gone. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 10.4. Draft combined delivery program.
Mayor, this is the starting commencement of public consultation on the draft operational plan and the underlying budget behind it. There is, look, I won't labour on in any detail, but there's been a lot of discussions between councillors and staff regarding how the operations plan and the operational budget and capital budget comes together. Proposed in this is the delivery of the first stage of the seniors living precinct, also to fund the extension of the runway. It's been budgeted for pending a further council decision, and a more than $20 million capital program with a focus being on rural areas for renewal. So it will need to come back at the May meeting for final decision, and in that time we'll seek comments and feedback from the community.
Thank you. Is anyone got any questions or comments? Councillor Craig?
Nowhere in the recommendation does it say that we're actually going to endorse or adopt this at the next meeting. It says in dot point 3 that we're going to assess the submissions and that we will determine the rates and charges. But at no point does it say on the 20th of May that we're going to adopt the budget. I'm just not sure the wording in that recommendation is correct. Because further down, it does say that we intend to adopt the budget on the 20th of May.
Certainly, through Mr. Mayor, the intention is to bring the operational plan and budget back to the council in May, but obviously, depending on the feedback, we will put a recommendation to adopt it finally in May when it comes back. But it doesn't need to be, those words don't need to be contained in this recommendation because it's only going out for public consultation. So point 1 talks about being extended for a further year, and point 2 talks about be placed on the operational plan and the budget be placed on public exhibition. The underlying intention behind that is for it to come back at some point prior to the end of the financial year to be adopted. But it didn't necessarily need to be stated that there is intended to be an adoption in May because we don't know what the feedback is going to be.
Okay.
So is the May meeting the absolute last that council can approve it, or is it the June meeting?
May.
Technically, the
May, because this year we have, bring this one for 1 month, bring them 1 month ahead. So literally is so what we are doing here is we put into the public consultation, we put into the public exhibition. So then in my council meeting, we will be putting that all together as adoption for the budget and adoption for the fees and charges and the statement of revenue. So I guess, if the first one is adopt words, so we could maybe change that one to, so the intention, just like, Phil has mentioned, is the intention for the first one is we are trying to say we are going to adopt this document because of the impact of COVID. So we are going to adopt that because normally is the deliver plan normally is only going to be 3 years, every 3 years, but due to the COVID-19, we put them into 1 more year to based on our, a long-term financial plan. But the adoption should be May.
We've intended to bring it forward by 1 month due to the implementation timeframe to bring the rates harmonisation into effect, which was adopted by council earlier in the year. That's the intention. Technically, though, it isn't required to be adopted by June. if it was adopted by at June, then it would take an extra month for us to get that in place, and there'll be a bit of uncertainty in the start of the new financial year.
Councillor McCullers.
I'm just a little bit concerned, like budgets, essentially as soon as we adopt a budget, it's pretty much set in stone and the money is sort of virtually spent. Now, there's probably two projects in there that concern me a little bit. One's the airport and the other one's the senior living, or living, however they're living. So essentially, if we adopt the budget in May or June or whatever, that sort of locks us into borrowing money. And I'm not sure that we've really had that robust conversation, especially around the airport, about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing to do, or whether it's sustainable. So, you know, we've done the long-term financial plan, and that sort of shows that we'll whittle away our reserves to about 18 million from about 45 in the next, you know, however long. Now, some people might think that's sustainable. I don't think it is. So I just want to make sure that by adopting the budget with the airport and the senior living component in there, that we're not totally locking ourselves into those investments, because fair enough, the senior livings is a non-for-profit thing, but essentially, you know, it's going to be a drain, but somewhere along the line you would have thought that it's a money making or a money revenue sort of neutral type arrangement. So I'm just a little bit hesitant. You know, I'd be happy if there's some caveats around those two projects that allow us to have the flexibility when we get close to that, you know, whether we get the funding from the New South Wales government or whatever, because there's balls in the air. So yeah, that's about where I'm sitting. I'm just, you know, and I'm pretty sure that's, not that I was at the last audit meeting, but I think that's pretty much the views from our audit group about the sustainability.
But items within the budget are not locked in stone. All it needs to do is come
Well,
back.
as soon as it's in the budget, Norm,
No, that's that might have been the history before, but if the council want to change, whether this council or the future council want to change something that's in the budget, they can bring it back, rescind the motion and put a new motion up. That's the process.
Yeah, because you've got, that's going on public exhibition. So there's going to be comment made from around that. So it has to come back for council to debate that.
yeah, actually all I'm saying is, you know, when we go to adopt this budget in May or June, I want some caveats around the fact that we would need to have another discussion regarding borrowing money, essentially, to fund these projects.
That could be a discussion at a workshop before the meeting.
Well, actually, the council meeting is where you have your discussions, essentially, where you make your decisions, not in workshops.
Mr. Mayor, if through you, I can understand where Councillor McCullers is coming from. So in the lead up to these decisions, I'm making sure that there is decisions still to be made. That means that we are not necessarily locking things in, because with those two projects in particular, there's still some unknowns. What the budget allows for is the capacity to borrow the money if council determines, and it factors in the borrowing costs as part of the operational budget. On both the seniors living precinct, as we've just talked about before in a previous report, there will be a report coming back to the council by June to make a final determination as to which way it proceeds. And I won't act on anything around the seniors living precinct that's outside of the current resolution, which is to work on designs and more detailed costings. And we've also obviously applied for the grant. In terms of the runway as well, the same thing applies. There still needs to be a further council decision regarding that project, which will need to be fleshed out as to what size it is, and that's going to be very much determined on our discussions at the moment with the state government, who, as we know, have not come forward despite what was, if you like, promised before, haven't come forward with any state funding at this stage. So there is still 2 decisions to be made on those particular projects by council. So the budget simply, it does have that caveat, it allows us to make provision for the borrowing of those projects if they proceed.
Thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to ask, what is actually going out? Is the draft combined delivery program going out? Is the preamble going out with it?
Yes.
I'd be disappointed if there's nothing in the preamble about council intending to borrow 4 point whatever it was we were going to borrow. I think you've got to go out front with the community and say this is what we're looking at. And somehow I think it's got missed there.
We do have that one under the section part 5, we have the borrowing cost there. So we did mention that, council is exploring some of the borrowing costs there.
I think that needs to be.
Yep.
up front.
Do you think it's hidden?
Yes.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
Truly,
It's borrowing costs are there. I'm fine with that. I can see
It
it.
should be more to the front.
I think so.
More
Well, if that's
transparent.
what we're intending doing, we've
Yeah.
got to be open with it.
Point taken, Mr Mayor, through you, I'm more than happy to add a paragraph or a sentence in my introduction that also mentions the borrowing. Yeah, it's not intended to keep it hidden. So we will make sure we can flesh that out in more detail.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I have a real problem with sending this out to the public exhibition. We're talking about borrowing $6.1 million. That figure has never been put to me. I may have missed a meeting where we all discussed that. We've had no discussion about the business model for the retirement living project and how it's going to be structured, how we're going to pay that money back, how we're going to fund the interest on that money. None of that's been over this table. To me, our biggest responsibility is the financial security of this council. I mean, if we're going to get sacked from being fiscally irresponsible, like Central Coast, I mean, this is the best way to do it. We've got to be aware of what's going on, and there's too much in here. I mean, I've got 2 pages of stuff in there I want to ask questions about, just on this. It's just, we're not anywhere near going to public exhibition and borrowing 6.1 million, which I read last night in here. We've never spoken about 6.1 million around this table. I'm absolutely not going to endorse this go to public
That
exhibition.
6.1 is made up of 2 components, is that right?
Well, there's 4.7 for the
Senior living.
senior living and 2.5, and now we've just heard we're going to borrow 4 million, which is 2.5 for the airport and 1.5 for retirement living. So I'm confused, and I just don't think if you have a really good look at where we are in the general fund, we're not going that well, and we're looking at borrowing money without actually having a plan of paying it back. And to me, that's irresponsible, and that's not what I'm here for. We've got 102 full-time employment positions that cost us $2 million more to fund those positions than we get in rates revenue. I mean, that's not a good position to be in either. So when you look at the general fund, we're not travelling well, and that is seriously where there could potentially be liquidity problems in the future. And I'm not happy. I'm happy to borrow money if we look at a plan to pay it back. We haven't looked at a plan to pay it back. So there's a lot of things we need to discuss before I'll be happy that, with this budget.
Thanks, Councillor McCracken.
I have more questions, but I'll leave you with that one.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's been 4 workshops with councillors. I believe, I can't recall everything that was said at those workshops. I believe we did mention a couple of times about having the ability to borrow within those workshops.
That doesn't automatically mean that you can go and borrow.
That's right.
Still got to come back to
That's
council
right.
to get the final tick to take the next step.
Exactly right. So what it does is make allowance in the budget to have the capacity, and certainly while a 4-year delivery program is for 4 years, and it's only been extended by 1 due to the changes in the election cycle, and the annual budget is only a 12-month budget. Underlying in that, when you factor in borrowing costs such as interest and premium payments, it is presumed that it will continue on until the payback of that loan. And those loans are proposed over, now, just correct me if I'm wrong here, Amanda, over 10 years?
Yes, over 10 years, and through the Mr. Mayor, the $6.1 million for the total capital project is $3.6 million of a senior living precinct and the $2.5 million for the airport.
Why have we chosen 10 years?
Well, look, that's
The lifespan of the runway, for instance, is not 10 years, it's more like 40 or 50 years. So what's the rationale behind that?
I think it's, from my experience within local government, it's generally custom and practice to make them only 10 years. But that doesn't mean that we must stay in that. We could make it over 30 years if necessary. It's just that'll change the premium in interest. And also you'd have to be able to apply on that basis. And the funding body would, the borrowing body, whether it's a bank or T Corp, would have to respond accordingly. So, but it's a good question.
Yeah, I can relate to the airport question totally, because I think that probably needs some more action on. I have to say, like, the state government is probably the X factor there if they come on board, and that could be a caveat over that. That's borrowing. But the senior living has had a lot of discussion at workshop. When I could be wrong, but when I was in the last workshop, the council were absolutely unanimous that they wanted that project to proceed and support borrowing or getting funding somewhere.
If we saw some justification for the borrow.
Absolutely, I support the project and I support borrowing the money, but I want to see before we borrow the money, how are we going to pay it back? And what's the model? I mean, there's a committee that are on that retirement living project. And the idea is you come and you've I think you've planned and you've done a great job, but isn't it to come back to council and say we now propose to borrow money?
Correct, but the process has got to happen. Like we're in a budgetary timeline where we have to set a budget. We have to, and for that to be put in the budget, we've got to put it in. And if you want to take it out in June, you take it out. But the whole process, it's happening right as we speak. The modelling is being
I understand all that, but we just before we borrow money, you've got to have your plan on how you're going to pay it back.
Fully understand that, but it's got to go into your operational plan for that to happen. I see that. If we don't put it in now, we're going to wait another 12 months, and I think that's too long for the community to wait, under my opinion. So I think there's more information will be delivered, but I think it's just.
Through Mr. Mayor, so I can understand Councillor Crabbe's concerns because it's been a couple of months since council as a body has heard about the seniors living precinct and very much there has been a lot of work underway. We're getting clarified costs on infrastructure. We've got quotes for design. Excuse me. There is a committee meeting coming up on Monday, which has got Councillor Hall, the Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Betts on that committee, and our project manager will be putting forward options around and more detailed options around operating models and factoring into account the borrowings against that project will be part of that operating model. So the intent that I've taken away from the council is that this project needs to stand on its own 2 feet, and therefore it will be able to pay back those loans. If it can't, then seriously question back to this body, the council, as to whether we proceed with it. But at the moment, that's certainly not my indication. It's looking quite good. And if I can just add one more thing, there is that I've made sure that I put in there for the councillors' reassurance that there will not be anything taken further with the seniors living precinct until June, at least June, when we get a report back that will propose more detailed costs and operating models, and to either proceed or not proceed with the project.
So can you just clarify, are we borrowing $6.1 million or $4 million?
For what? The precinct?
Total borrowing. We've got none now.
Through Mr. Mayor, the total is $6.1 million.
Well, if it's 2.5 for the airport, and the general manager said
6
for the airport.
3.6 for the senior living precinct and the 2.5 for the airport.
That's what I had, but didn't the general manager just tell me it was 1.5 million for the retirement living? If it's $1 for $1 with the.
That's the,
Regional
If
fund.
we get
that's
the
the
grant.
application.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
the if.
application for the Building Better Regions Fund.
We haven't got
Um, and we've allowed 3.6 million, just in case the demand is there to be able to proceed with stage two. On, you know, on the basis of it proceeding with stage one, there's every possibility that stage one, when it's released, will fill in no time, and might need to have a bit of flexibility to move forward with stage two,
So 6.1 is the maximum.
maximum.
Yes, correct,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Can I ask when we may hear about the funding application?
That's a $3 million question. We have been, they have been quite slow in previous examples. We're hopeful of hearing by end of the financial year, because often these things are able to be committed by the end of the financial year through the machinery of government. But we certainly will stay on, which is why we've put forward the June. If we haven't heard back from them by then that's a different set of circumstances. You know, council can either choose to do it under its own steam or wait a bit longer, maybe wait until the new council review. Yep.
This might be a really simple one to answer, but I just don't understand when in the executive summary on page 49, it's got a total budget of 28.49 million, but we're spending 28.95 on capital work, which is higher than the budget figure.
Yeah, that's an operating budget of 28.49 million.
And the others
Capital budget of 28.95, which includes an estimate for carry forwards of funding we received this year, but were multi-year projects.
stuff carried over. Next question. Community engagement strategy. There's no description of what or how we're going to do the face-to-face meetings. We're endorsing this community engagement strategy in this recommendation. And I would suggest you don't just advertise it in the pastoral times. There are parts of the Shire that don't get the pastoral times. They get the other papers from the local towns around. So I think with all our advertising, it's got to be in the other papers, not just the pastoral times.
And more than just the paper.
Yeah, well, I
Yes,
think we're
that does
doing
appear,
electronic as well, according to the plan here. Yeah, but online sessions as well. But I just wanted the roadshow, what's that look like, and are we to be part of it, and what are the dates, and how are we going to sort of do all that? Because it's obviously going to happen fairly soon.
The next month.
Yeah, it's remiss of me to actually have that conversation with councillors at the previous workshop, but we were a bit, we scheduled that at a poor time, so not a lot of councillors could turn up. We do intend to, based on lessons learned from rates harmonisation, do intend to involve the councillors in their suggestions around where we should meet. So we've talked about generally a roadshow, but then we want to get some feedback from the council as to where the appropriate places are. Are they face-to-face or combined face-to-face and electronic forms? So very much want to consult very heavily, which is, you know, why I'm very happy to include things that may be missed, you know, in terms of our messages.
While we're on page 51, just above the strategic implications, I think the meeting should be 20th of May 2021, not 2020. And in the strategic implications, I think the second last line should read 2020, 2021, not 2019-20.
Thank you.
See what fishing does?
Eagle eye.
It wasn't that quiet.
Council was.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, and on page 103 of the budget, I probably should disclose an entity, but council's remuneration costs, it seems to end up in the middle of nowhere. It says that the council will fix the annual fee paid to blank.
I think it's on that. If you zoom in, zoom out, you'll see it's on another.
Yeah, it hasn't printed right.
Oh, isn't it?
That's a printout of a spreadsheet, so it's been hidden by the cell. So thanks for that feedback, Councillor Wallace.
While you're on that page, if you like, we've got a 4.6 increase in annual employee costs this year, but going forward, it's only 1% in the budget for the next 4 years. I find that really hard to believe.
Okay.
Well, somewhere else I read it's 2%.
and our rates are going up 2%. In there, yeah, I picked it up on page 103, that we're going up 4.36 currently this year, but in the next 3 years, it's 1% increase.
Doesn't sound right.
No,
Doesn't sound right.
thanks for that feedback, councillor McCrab. We'll take that on notice and get an answer back to you. It might be a typo, something within the operational planning.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Councillor McCrab.
Page 55, message from the mayor. You, sixth paragraph, I think it is, you, in recent years, Edward River community and the region have benefited from unprecedented funding through the Australian. Nothing.
What page?
Page 55. It's the fourth last paragraph of your message from the mayor. Second one down on the right hand side of the page.
Finished off.
Yeah.
Thanks. Once again, we'll amend that.
I also pointed out that there is next elections for the local government will be held on September 2022.
Yeah,
already been
that's-
pointed
Pick up
out.
on page 58.
Through you, Mr Mayor, page 105, there's a typo in there of off-lease dog park instead of off-leash. That's first page, son.
Had more than a dozen sets of eyes over this, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, well,
That's wrong.
At least it shows the original. That's right. Very.
I just want to raise or just bring to councillors' attention, page 107. On the bottom line there, it's the next 4 years, that's the general fund. Oh no, so it's the whole of council. It's just not pretty. And I just want to highlight, we're going into a borrowing phase. And our bottom line is not good. Yeah, so I just can't stress that enough. There's a question there I have regarding, we have a income from grants and contributions of nearly $6 million this year, and it drops down to just over 2 for the next 3 years. So what is that large amount? Is that still carry over from amalgamation money? Is that what some of that's what we're carrying forward? The projects we're carrying forward?
I'll ask Amanda Barber.
you wouldn't think it'd be carried forward for up to 3 years.
No, it's carried forward for this year. It's in the grants contributions for capital purposes, cash, is $6 million. And in the next 3 years of this budget, it's 2.2 million. And that has a huge impact on the bottom line.
There was 4 that wasn't spent in this current financial year that was moved into next financial.
Amanda will be on.
Through Mr. Mayor, so there are some of the grants funding, so we have assigned the agreement and then the money will be received in the next financial year. So that's the reason we have identified around $3.98 million to be reclassified. So in the report, I have mentioned in that this is a change by $4.01 million compared with our fourth council workshop. So in the 2023, 24, and 25 at this stage, there is no big commitment to have that longer financial indication to let us know that there are future funding to be received. So we only until 2022, we know that, we are going to receive that, additional grants funding for the capital work.
If I can add to that, Mr Mayor, the 2 million is an assumption around consistency of trend, probably predominantly roads to recovery, which is generally fairly consistent. It may go up or down by a little bit, but during the course of the next financial year, we may receive opportunities and be successful for new capital grants. And so the next year's budget in 23 that line will change based on what we know at the time.
Yeah, so it's actual, you can't assume, so you have to look what you can, so of course it's going to be pretty tight. The only way around that, I'd say, Councillor McCrabb, is services or employment.
Well, it's the two
It's the
things
only
we
way.
do, yeah. You know, as I've said, however, if we go and well, the other big thing we're not looking at here is own source revenue and the opportunities we're not getting there. And I think, you know, retirement living is one. If we decide not to make it not for profit and make some money out of it, or to fund the airport project, is sell airport land and go to, you know, on airfield living and things like that. There's opportunities out there, but they're certainly not in this budget, but we need to look forward at those. I'm concerned at page 108 about our current liabilities and how dramatically they're increasing over this 4-year budget without even looking at the long-term financial plan. And, you know, our statement of cash flows and how our borrowings are, that's where the 6.1 million's in there. And their finance costs, it's just, there's all these costs coming in and we've got to pay for it. And our rates are only going up by 2% a year and we can't even fund our employees with the rates.
Cover it, is it? So
So we've just got to be mindful when we make these decisions and we put a budget out there for everyone to look at. It's not pretty.
Councillor McAllister.
Given the concerns, and I think everybody has the concerns around the table about financial sustainability, and given that supposedly the New South Wales government thought there was efficiencies in merging councils, etc., I think it'd be a good time to start a project to actually start looking at the opportunities that Peter McCrabb's talking about, but also the opportunities within the operations field and things like that for efficiencies or different ways of doing things. And we did discuss this, I think, at a workshop or at a council meeting on the long-term financial plan regarding various operations in the outdoor area. But I just think we need some rigour around it. You know, like it's fine to sort of talk about these things, but if you don't actually put some rigour around it and actually go and do the work and come back, we'll be in exactly the same position as we are today next year if we're sitting around this table. So I would like to think that maybe management can come back with a project that actually looks at, you know, trying to draw the efficiencies out of this business, you know, and well, out of the council, it's not a business, but around the assumptions that were made around, you know, merging of councils, but also around, you know, other opportunities to generate income. Okay. So I think that's the best way of doing it. Just get some rigour around it and start, you know, turning things upside down and shaking things.
Through Ms. Mayor, I'll respond to that. Look, council could, the best way to get that locked in, if you like, is to add a line to the operational plan where council resolves to seek management's expertise on that. You know, we certainly have the intention, as we've spoken about in workshops prior, to look for commercial opportunities, as I've spoken also to councillors during various meetings. But having a line item in there that sets the intention of council to look for entrepreneurial or commercial opportunities to reduce the rate burden on the ratepayer, to increase income, etc., would be the best way to make sure that's
in-house efficiencies.
And in-house efficiencies. So I'm more than happy to take that. Either council could move an amendment to the motion, or we could bring that back as a recommendation, a change when it becomes to be adopted.
So how would you do that?
Or you'd add a line item to
No. I'm saying you add the line item. That's nice, but how do you actually achieve it?
We need to. Well, we've got a number of things already underway, which are less formal than a project. In terms of doing it, you would adopt it as a project steering group and then figure out where are the opportunities there. You'd use the continuous improvement project program process that I've previously put in front of the councils, which is Plan Do Check Act, and you'd make it more formal. You may need to get some specific expertise to help do that, but
No, I think it's got to be in-house, Bill, and it's got to, you've got to generate it yourself.
Mr. Mayor, since last council workshop, our finance team, we have undertaken whole wide, council-wide, analysis, just like last council workshop, we have mentioned. So a council report or council workshop report will be prepared in the next council workshop, which is the income analysis compared with the Riverina region and some statewide benchmarking analysis. So what we have done is we have compared the horizontal and the vertical analysis. So horizontal Y is compared with 8 other councils about what is our revenue side, and based on the last 3 financial years, just checking about like a drill down to the income level at the revenue level, just to see is there any opportunities. And also we have compared with our fees and the charges, what they will be, or they might be, some opportunity for us to identify, to see what are the, like the benchmark, and also some of the benchmark we have using the Metro New South Wales Council as well. Yeah. So that's it.
So that's, and I've had a cursory look at that website, and essentially, you would think, or you would hope, that the Edward River Council was actually undercharging for various services, but when you actually have a look at our group, we're actually probably overcharging. So I don't think there's a lot of opportunity in sort of benchmarking ourselves, because I think you probably won't like what you see. So essentially it comes back to, we've got to start really looking at how we create efficiencies within this organisation. And I can assure you, it's not by increasing the employment of people, okay? Because that's the only thing, as we talked about in that workshop, the only levers we can pull are those 2 up the top, which is people.
Fees and charges.
Yeah, and fees and charges. So really, I want some rigour, not necessarily, in this budget, like this one's pretty much gone, but I want some rigour done in the next 12 months for the next one. Okay? That's what I want to see happen.
Well, in terms of, through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of answering the question around how it would be done, you would set up a project and you would provide regular reports back to the council on scope definition. Does that look like we're on the right track? And then, as was suggested, there might be opportunities with seniors living precinct or development opportunities in the airport, which would earn more revenue for council. But there also would be a number of prongs around efficiencies, cost savings, etc. So that's the way you do it. If it was an operational plan line, you would, with the view to not put any additional budget to it, we'd have to come back and develop the scope and put it in front of council as that's developed and give progress reports.
Council.
There's 2 ways to look at that, and I can support where Councillor McAllister's coming through, looking at the efficiency of the organisation. But somewhere along, at some point in time, this council has to think where they stand in terms of, are they going to be a conservative council and just chug along and keep it tight, run it nicely, which it pretty well has been, or do you look at a bit of a risk reward and open the horizons up to some commercial activities that the council can enter into? And that is quite ranging in terms of, and I'll take my hat off as a real estate agent, but land development is a huge thing that the council should be getting involved in, or in my opinion, could be getting involved in. That would have some plenty upside, but there is a risk. And that would mean probably borrowing money or using capital reserves to initially fund that to generate some serious income. There could be opportunities, I don't know, you could be buying water. I don't know, there's a lot of different things that this council could be looking at on a commercial basis. You look a bit perplexed there, but I know it's,
Please.
no, but is that something that the council has to maybe take their,
Well, then
open their
unsourced-
eyes
unsourced
to?
revenue is
It's gotta be
something
on the
that we need.
But the council has to have the thinking, is it something that they will look at, or whether you just close the door on something like that, you just look at what you're doing?
Actually, I think it's a combination of everything. I'm saying, open your eyes, have a look at the opportunities, but at the same time, get efficient within the organisation.
100%. But it might need that the council has to look at some outside expertise from other community members to kind of drive that as well.
Well, I think I've pretty much had enough of consultants for the last 4 years.
Yes, I agree.
And essentially, if we're going to actually achieve these goals, you actually have to own them. Management have to own them, not a consultant. These guys up here are the ones who are going to drive it.
I didn't say consultants, I mean.
You did say
No,
consultants.
outside community, but
Yeah,
consultant
community.
with some strong skills.
Yeah.
The thing that I've seen that we've missed a lot is the range of options that we have looked at. Just because you put up options doesn't mean you adopt every bloody one. You've got to be strategic and very thorough in your process of the options. Put them on the table, but you haven't got to adopt everyone. And that's internal rigour, really. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, and just thanks, Councillor McAllister. Yeah, definitely take on board your comments around with consultants and management and internalising them. You know, we've got plenty of documents sitting on shelves, that coffee table books that we talk about. There is a certain amount of expertise we need to get in, but we've got to make sure we do what we can and only get what we need. Definitely support that work, and we've been doing that work on operational efficiencies, especially around road maintenance. And so,
And I applaud this piece of paper, mate. Very well done.
thank you. In terms of staffing for council, one of the big changes since we've talked about it last is that we now have employed our manager operations. So that position is a big driver in terms of in the operational section, especially around roads and getting those efficiencies. So he's finding his feet. He's got the information that has been presented to council before about those efficiencies. So around that plan, do, check, act type thing, we're in a position to come back to council with what the actual doing's going to be, and then reporting, benchmarking just ourselves, what are our costs now, doing the changes, trying the changes, and coming back to council to get we're heading in that efficiency direction.
It's one of those things, you can talk about it all day, but essentially, you know, it's got to come back to something definitive that you've got to drive yourself to try and achieve. And really, in the end, I would, you know, the number might be 10%. Let's try and get 10% efficiency out of this organisation in the next 12 months. Come back to us and tell us how you might do it. You know, that might be as simple as it is. But that's the sort of stuff, you know, and you talked about, you know, in the long-term financial plan about your efficiencies and everything like that, the 100K, well, I keep on saying that's one person essentially, but that's the sort of easy way of doing it. Let's set ourselves a target to decrease our cost by 10% and see whether we can achieve it for the next budget.
Councillor Wallace.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I was just going to, I'm happy with I think you're on the right track here. I think it's, you know, it's a good thing for the team to get their teeth into, and it worried me that if we don't do something like a 10% or whatever, that we're going to have to turn around and go for a huge rate hike to just get this bottom level in the black.
Like many of the merged councils have.
That's it. Sorry. Yes.
Councillor McCracken.
I think just in discussions we've had regarding this budget up until this point, every department's cut as much as possible. I think really going forward, we do need to be looking at other options for making more money rather than cutting. And that's the key. You know, as Councillor Hall's already suggested, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yes, a lot.
We should be putting money towards developing those. And if we're going to borrow money for that, that's fine, because we're going to have a business case there that says we're going to make money. And that's the only way I see us funding the airport thing. Just my final question on this is page 111, the infrastructure, non-current assets, Mark, probably your department or Director of Infrastructure. Non-current assets, infrastructure, property, plant and equipment. In 2024, that goes up by 10 million, that value, and also in 2025, it goes up by something like 24 million. Just wondering why such big increases when the first 2 years of this budget, it remains the same.
Yeah, so that's something I have to take on board with that, because that's generally a modelling of our what's coming out of our asset management plans in terms of that forward work. Now, part of that is around what is renewal and what is new. So a general increase in that amount is showing more new assets than just a renewal. We're trying over this time to have a renewal budget that would, through revals over that time, revaluations would bring that back to, because it's replacing an existing asset, so bring that to a smaller amount. So I think the expenditure in there is showing that the future capital works plans and where they'll be. I think in terms of how it's hitting that amount and allowing for what is actually renewal works, which won't increase that total asset amount, is something that we'll follow up, just so we get that figure more accurate. It is important because that figure ultimately, that and useful lives, is what drives depreciation, which hits that income statement. So it is an important figure for us.
And my concern is it throws out the figures, the bottom line figures on those 2 years as well. If they aren't right, I mean, you can look across the bottom line and think, in 4 years' time we're going fine, but if you can't explain what that figure is, well, we're flying blind.
The intent from around the assets over that 4-year time frame is renewal, and new assets would be sort of grant funding opportunities.
And yeah, as you've mentioned, the flip side of that is if they go up in value and depreciation, it's going to hit us on the other side. So we've got to be very careful about what figure we put in there, because it's going to cost us.
Yeah, we'll have all that figure.
Now, we've had a fair bit of discussion on this. Now, the intent of the item is to get it out for public exhibition. Now, we've had some private discussions about a variety of things, and that should be part of the process to get that back in for us to consider. So,
recommendation .1 is really so we can continue on for, as we are until after the elections.
That's correct. Yeah.
I've got the words of an additional item to be added to the operational plan.
Yep.
So, councillors, just based on the discussion at the moment, I've just roughly scratched out potentially a .5, or it might be a new .3, and everything moves down. Then an additional objective be added to the operational plan, developing a project to improve efficiencies internally and source new entrepreneurial revenue opportunities. Just as a thought out there, if councillors could either adopt that now as a signal of intent for public consultation, or we could word up flesh out some better words to be put forward in the revised operational plan when it comes back to the council following consultation. But I suppose just a signal that there's a fair level of enthusiasm within the management team to undertake these things. So getting support from council to do this is, very good.
That sort of covers the.
Yeah,
intent
no,
of
I'm
what
happy
you
with
were
that. I was
saying before.
gonna
What
sort
that
of
does
walk
is
away and just.
What that does is put that on the record for the council minutes.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
also, yeah,
And it shows the public the intent.
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
right. So project singular or project plural?
Or you could even call it a program, because there might be a lot of little projects that are added, or
That's
there
what
might
I'm
be
thinking.
a couple of, so perhaps we rename that to program.
I'd like projects. It makes it more definitive.
Then you need a project manager.
Singular or plural? You want more than one project?
But we don't want a project manager.
No.
Belinda's got those going up as we look.
And I think Margaret can be one project that looks at everything like investment.
Yeah.
Is
efficiency,
that right?
so-
Because it's very hard to change it.
Yes, yes.
Shall I get
To be.
back to you?
Any other comments or questions?
I'll move it.
Right, moved by councillor McAllister, that we get out there and put it out to exhibition. Basically, that's
Yeah.
what the intent was. We got a second for that? Councillor Hall? Any further comments or questions? Those in favour? Those against?
Aye.
Those don't. Councillor McCray. Those against? Motion carried. Item 10.5. Long-term financial plan.
Another page of it.
Ditto.
Pretty much.
Your recommendation.
So this is the long-term financial plan as is designed to line up with the operational budget and as adjusted from the previous years. And it's recommended for adoption by the council. Obviously, there is a lot of conversations happened in the previous item, which may apply to this one. And it will be evident also in the minutes of the ARIC meeting, which are on this, that there's been a discussion around liquidity risk, and that's what it is. There is a risk in terms of our forward numbers, which are always a little bit foggier. The first, the more you go out, that we could, unarrested, it could mean that we could run out of money, but there's definitely an intention by the management team and also some discussions with councillors that we want to turn that around over time. And so the conversations had by councillors in the previous item are very relevant to this one, and hence why there is some enthusiasm to be able to find new opportunities and also make cost savings and efficiencies.
Any questions or comments? Councillor McRae.
Just, we've got 3 scenarios in there. And I find that a bit, if we're adopting a long-term financial plan, aren't we adopting a plan rather than 3 or 4? There might be 4 in there with 2A and 2B. I mean, shouldn't we be just have a plan that we're adopting?
Very good
Or
question.
do we need to decide on which of those 4 options we're going to go with? Because I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Just because they're in the plan, I hear what you say, just because they're in the plan doesn't mean they're going to proceed. It's just, you've got the opportunity to proceed in your budget.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand it's a requirement of developing by the local government department to have 3 scenarios within the templated long-term financial plan. And as I said in the report, the one we are looking at this stage is the scenario 2, which is sort of the middle of the road one. But that also identifies in scenario 3 that there is some intentions or desires by councillors in past decisions to look at curbside recycling and FOGO, as well as upgrading the sewer work. So that gives councillors an outside trajectory, if you like, if those projects are agreed to proceed. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, sure, Mr. Mayor. So due to, so according to the Local Government Act, so council are required to adopt 3 scenarios. So this is only our long-term financial plan, which we have made 3 years ago, compared with our previous long-term financial plan. And this is only a revised version, because every 3 years, 3 or 4 years, we actually just revise all our figures. So this is not a legal requirement to say we have to achieve any of them. So, and again, the long-term financial plan is just only provide all the councillors and the public different scenarios and kind of like, analysis there to provide a more, longer term indication there. And for the scenario 3, it is just only a full range of proposed capital budget. It give us open eyes, exercise to say what if analysis.
Amanda, is the 3 scenario regime something new? Because it sort of doesn't ring a bell with me
No,
before.
we haven't had 3 scenarios in the past.
With, sorry, through Mr. Mayor, with the IPNR requirements coming in, so they've been a little while now, I think just before amalgamation, the requirements to come into that IPNR, which the CSP and all that, the requirement for the 3 scenarios came in with the IPNR. So it's a 6 to 7 year sort of, yeah.
Councillor McCredden.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a question to Amanda regarding, you just stated that we don't accept to achieve the long-term financial plan.
So, Mr. Mayor, so this is our goal to achieve that, but it's like using a different perspective, it's kind of a financial modeling, yeah. And like what, GM mentioned, scenario 2 will be something, we're really, as a management team, we're really, are aiming for.
Looking at the general fund, I certainly hope we don't achieve it.
Yeah, same, yeah.
And that's not a joke.
That's a good point. But as through Mr. Mayor, as Ms. Barber mentioned, it is a revision of one that's been going for the life of this council, I understand. Was it 2019 that the long-term financial plan was adopted? And that's as the council was grappling with merge two councils. But it has had the effect of being able to open council's eyes into the trajectory into the future years. And so absolutely right, we should be working towards making sure that those numbers are looking better than they currently show
Eventually.
in the future years beyond the long-term financial plan, beyond this council and this year.
Just looking from outside, Mr. Mayor, on page 3 of the capital works program, I would have thought you'd, not page 3 of item 3, aerodrome at 4.7 mil and seniors living precinct at 3.6. I would have thought those figures were around the wrong way.
Yes, I would have thought that too.
So which page you on?
Oh, heavens, no, it's 238.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's probably a discussion for another day. But
What are you saying? That got saying
Well,
something we
I'm
Air
just
drive
saying,
for
if you look at that from
4.7.
some of the public, they're saying, well, hang on, you're going to spend 4.7 million on an aerodrome and 3.6 on a,
Exactly right.
it's the wrong way around.
It's in terms of the dollar values, Councillor Wallace. Yeah, it's the total project cost rather than the amount we're borrowing.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, I'll move it just because it's a requirement of the Local Government Act, and essentially it, hopefully we don't achieve the numbers that are in there.
Right, so the recommendation we've got moved by Councillor McAllister. Second reading. Councillor Hall, any further questions or comments? All those in favour?
No.
Against? Carried.
Against, yeah.
Councillor McCrabb
Oh, sorry.
was against it.
Yep. Item 10.6, strategic committee framework, disbanding of committees.
Is this the abolition of the few? I'll move.
Moved by councillor McAllister, recommendation. A second, councillor Wallace. Questions or comments? All those in favour? Against, carried.
Not against it.
Here's the next one.
Where are we?
Liquor licence.
10.7. Hallelujah.
Through Mr. Mayor, this is a resolution to support a draft submission to the liquor licence application for Coles Liquor Land in Denilican, next to, in the small shop that's vacant at the moment next to the Coles supermarket on Harding Street. There is no regulatory decision for council to make here, albeit the Liquor and Gaming Authority has strongly requested an opinion from the council. Now, I've sought informally to seek views of individual councillors to see if there is any sort of agreement amongst councillors, and it's no problem that there isn't. That's part of the beauty of the democratic process. But if there was agreement, I could have avoided putting it to the council for a resolution and just put forward the views of council via a submission under my delegation. But because there's a difference between the opinions of various councillors, I need to get a resolution of the council, and because of that difference between the opinions of councillors, all reasonably valid, I have to maintain the status quo. So I've put forward a draft submission citing a no objection by the council, but pointing out a number of concerns that councillors have, or the council has, with regards to the application. Specifically, if I could summarise that, this is presented to the community and the Liquor of Edward River and the Liquor and Gaming Authority as a need in the community, and very little consequence socially or economically, which I think is not necessarily accurate. So I've pointed out in my submission, or in the draft submission, a number of those issues. If council wish to move a motion to put in an objection to the liquor licence, there is scope there within the wording of this to be able to change a few words, and the recommendation, the motion could be made that way. But given there's difference of opinion, I've put forward citing no objection, but outlining concerns.
Thanks, Rob.
Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict.
Councillor
I just remembered I have a conflict. I own.
You own Coles, do you?
I own shares in Coles, sorry.
Drink plenty of wine.
If it's a material amount, I think is when the conflict.
What are you talking, $1 million?
10, I think more than 10,000 in an individual share. Is that
Councillor
right, Mark? Are you shaking your head?
Can I ask a question? I don't quite understand. So you're putting a submission in that saying on behalf of council we don't object to things, but what if I do? Like I
so-
object to.
Yeah, that's what
So individual councillors have expressed to me varying views, some saying they object and others saying they don't object, which is absolutely fine. They're individual
Yep.
views. Because I haven't got sort of unanimous views one way or another, it's incumbent on me, I believe, to maintain the status quo, which is to not object. But I have managed to point out a few concerns. So it's valid for the council to put a submission to the Liquor and Gaming Authority when considering this liquor licence to not object, but also put concerns in. But it's equally valid to also to object. So if council wants to object via a vote of the council, we just require one councillor to put forward an alternative motion, which could essentially be the recommendation with 3 words changed to make it an objection. Or
Because I don't understand where that leaves me, because
That doesn't preclude you from
they're
individual
saying,
Peter Betts putting your own personal.
oh yeah, and which I did, but for me, reading that, it's like I'm saying that I'm agreeing as a councillor with council that I have concerns, but I don't object, whereas I'm both. I understand your concerns and absolutely agree, but I also object to the liquor licence being issued. I, as Peter Betts, as councillor Betts, I don't want that liquor licence issued, whereas for me personally, I feel that that's saying that Peter has agreed,
Yes.
but she doesn't object, but she wants everyone to know that
The
these are her
recommendation's been
concerns.
put up by the general manager and the council votes, and one way or the other.
Yep.
It's a council decision. Not,
An individual.
now, you mightn't be happy with it, but Councillor McCrab has voted twice against
Yep.
recommendations. That's fine.
So that would be my way of saying, so if the council say, Pete, moving forward, we're going to go with this, my objection to it is to object to that,
Yes.
To vote against.
So you
to vote against it,
voted
like
and
what
get it
Pete did
recorded.
before. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Right, okay, thank you.
call for division.
Yeah.
We could vote against this motion, but put up an alternate motion.
Correct.
Or a councillor
Do
could
we-
just add an alternative motion. You
Do
don't
we have to do anything? Who is this
we've been
going on
asked to
liquor
put it
telling
out.
us what to do?
Yeah, they're asking us to.
Yeah.
put it on, aren't they?
We understand that, through you, Mr Mayor, we understand this will be heard by the board because it's been knocked back a couple of times in the last decade or so. And so therefore, the Liquor and Gaming Authority has requested a response from the council. If there is no motion moved, it would be very difficult for me to presume what council's intent was. So it'd be my strong request to make a decision one way or another.
Why'd they make, excuse me, why'd they just make a decision over us anyway? Because how big they are.
Yeah, but they tick the box because council's put
we have to
something
do
in.
it.
Yeah.
It could possibly have an effect on whether the liquor licence is issued or not. And, you know, so from this point forward, a councillor could move the recommendation and get a seconder, and then it's voted on. And that might not be a unanimous vote. There might be people who vote against that or for it.
Right.
And if that motion is carried and it moves forward, or a councillor may wish to, at this stage, adjust the recommendation to be an alternative motion that cites an objection. And if that's the case, then the democratic vote will take place. And I would recommend that council asks for a division so that all of the votes can be recorded.
Right.
So, okay, sorry.
Councillor
Pete.
McCracken.
Through you, Mr. Neither of those alternatives, we have to have a unanimous vote.
No,
No.
as
so
long as you've got a
doesn't-
majority,
Yeah.
yes.
Correct.
Fair enough.
But then that is council's stance, whichever way it goes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Therefore,
We walk
it
out of
is
this room and
the
support
onus
council's
of all the
decision.
councillors
Yeah.
to agree or publicly not to make any comment against that recommendation.
So to make it clear for me to understand, so if I put up and said, I want the recommendation to be that we object to the licence, then it goes to a vote, and then the councillors may go, no, sorry, Pete, we want it to go ahead, but either way, I can still
Record your.
record my objection to it, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be on the minutes.
I'll move this recommendation.
So councillor Hall's moved the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Moved and second
Councillor McGrath.
by
I
Councillor
agree with something for a change.
McCracken. Any comments or questions?
I'll just speak to the motion. I just think council has to be very careful where they sit in terms of these type of, and it can become a precedent in some ways, that, and you have to take your hat off and be fairly objective when you're thinking about this, because if this was a local business wanting to do this development, would we be thinking it in the same way? I've seen a lot of submission saying because it's a multinational and the money's leaving the town and so on, that they're objecting on that basis. But you have to think about it in a wide-ranging manner that, one, it'll employ people that will be spending money in the town, bringing jobs to the town and retaining employment and people here in the town. The major thing that I see is, and I think COVID has seen this unbelievably, the amount of money that leaves the town to leakage to Echuca is unbelievable. And you go to any retailer along the street in the last 6 to 8 months, they can't believe the money that has stayed in the town. There's probably two or three major reasons why they do go to Echuca, and that's supermarkets, probably hardware stores and alcohol. They're the three major drivers. Now, we have the other bottle shops. I quite concur, but this particular one would probably, I think, be a benefit to the local retailers. Well, they won't be going down to Dan Murphy's as much as they would. They'd stay here and probably purchase. And that, I'm not saying that's an absolute fact, but that's my opinion, because the leakage is incredible. And I think that's evidence-based in the last 6 to 8 months with COVID. And look, I just get the fact that, yeah, it's a multinational company, but it's an employment opportunity. It's going to fill a hole in that sector. The other businesses that may suffer, yeah, I fully concur, but look, they're a second. They've got other parts of that business that probably may not may improve from this. I don't know, but so that's just my opinion. I think we just have to be looking very carefully as a council that if we're going to make decisions on particularly new businesses or potentially controversial decisions around that, I just don't know if that's our place to make those decisions. And you might get someone who wants to open a new TAB in a hotel. Do we then make the decision or say something there? I don't know. So I just think we just got to look at it fairly objectively. I think the recommendation is quite good, citing a no objection, but outline all the issues around the potential kind of concerns from the community's perspective. But that's
Councillor McCradden.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I fully endorse what Councillor Hall's suggesting. I mean, I'm really disappointed with the liquor and gaming that we actually have to put a submission in regarding this. It's not our position to support or deny any business coming to town. We should welcome any business that wants to come to town. Creates competition. Competition is good. I mean, it makes everyone more efficient. I mean, maybe that's what we need with competition in council. But it's when people look to relocate to a different town, they look at what's there. And, you know, we've got, if we didn't have new businesses coming to town and, you know, the big multinationals, I mean, that's an attraction for a lot of people to come to town. And having another business is a positive, not a negative. But just we've just got to look at it in a positive light. And sure, I don't think it's going to, I mean, I don't know how much money goes out of town. I mean, the money that we want to look at is the jobs in the town. It's still people's choice to shop at Coles or not shop at Coles, and it's their choice to go to Liquorland if it opens. I mean, we're not determining where people buy, we're just giving people more opportunity, and I think that gives us more opportunity to get more people into town.
Any other comments, questions?
I thought the railway hotels submission was the best submission I've ever read, Mr Mayor.
What?
The railway hotel submission.
Right. Yes.
What page is that on?
360 onwards. I think they raised some pretty good valid points about traffic.
Traffic's hell at the moment anyway. We need to address traffic there in general into the supermarket.
Well, that's in the plan, isn't it? Harding Street is going to be assessed.
Not the bypass.
I think we need to address the traffic issue first before we do anything else.
Well, they've got bad traffic issues there, just getting in and out of Coles, let alone Liquorland.
Exactly right.
Will it be?
Mark,
Through you, Ms Mayor, sorry, just with that. So we are currently working with Transport on the designs and that for Harding Street in that area from Harfleur Street up to the Ockatah Street roundabout. Engaged a designer for that, and the initial meetings around that will be happening next week. So yeah, hopefully we can start addressing those concerns and get funding. Any works from it will be sort of funded between Transport for New South Wales and Council.
It impressed Councillor Wallace a great deal if you could investigate building a road up the back of the whole show.
Oh, Pat Barry's asked that.
I know, I think it's one of Pat Barry's best ideas. Sorry.
I was starting to worry.
Yeah, I know.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just make one statement. Like, I've got I don't like the words no objection, but when you look at the dynamics of what has occurred with previous two applications, there's been no significant change. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the Liquor and Gaming Commission are going to go against their previous decisions when, you know, there hasn't been a huge expanse in population. One of my suggestions, instead of a new licence, why don't they look at trying to get an existing licence? And anyway, that's it. Yeah. Further questions?
Do we have to look at extending the alcohol-free zone to cover this area? As like drinking on the street? Because it's not in it.
Good question, Ruth. Good question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think that would be reviewed. The alcohol-free areas the council has adopted are very much around places of sale and assisting the police around managing issues with that. So at the moment, the areas do cover all places of sale. So with a new place of sale, whilst it may or may not have been discussed in the documentation to date, we would expect that the police would be coming to council just to have a discussion with us and just to keep that sort of blanket philosophy in assisting the police. I would think that'd be a discussion.
Good. Any other further questions or comments? We've got a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Sorry, I'll do that again. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Councillor Metcalf and Councillor Betts. One on the division. One on the division.
It will be.
So we'll record it.
It will be recorded.
All right, the recommendation has been approved. Now we might just have a 5-minute break before I go and get these.
Yep, Tiffany's got to get them.
We won't have a break, we'll keep going.
I'm going to get the drink ready.
Item 10.8. While we're waiting, Belinda, I don't ever remember going to one of these meetings.
Hill Race one.
I don't remember ever going in my term of year, going to one of those meetings,
It wasn't held last year,
or the year before.
and the year before something happened. Adam certainly did attend.
Are we members of the Australian Local Government Association?
Yes,
How much does that cost?
might take that on notice.
That's improving.
Oh, she might be new.
Just to be able to do that association.
Because James is like James. Yes. Congratulated on that.
Next week, I think, in Melbourne.
You have. It's not compulsory. It says 10, maybe.
Oh, I didn't realise that it was,
Up there.
no, it's a long weekend.
Yeah.
Exams are long weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, on 10.8. The motion was passed.
Okay.
Do we have any sandwiches?
No,
Didn't think so.
no sandwiches there.
He introduced item 10.8.
Is there a program for that? Is there a program of what is going to be done?
Item 10.8 is the Regional Forum for Australian Local Government Association. There's a recommendation there. You want to speak to it, Phil?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, that the Australian Local Government Association generally gets together on a yearly basis to consider motions that would be put towards various state or federal governments, and also as a means of professional development for councillors and mayors. Obviously it's optional. It's generally been custom and practice from where I've worked before that the mayor and the general manager would attend, and there will be one opportunity prior to June to consider the motions that are being put forward to the forum, and also whether we wish to make any ourselves. So that's why this has come through to the council as an opportunity for other councillors to also attend in line with professional development and expenses and facilities policy.
For the recommendations there, someone like to move that? Or any questions or comments? Councillor McRae?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Is this basically just a regional version of what happens in Sydney every year?
Yeah.
And is there anything to be gained in having a regional one as well?
Very good question.
This is the Australian one, so basically it's the national.
It's 570.
Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of the New
It's not a
South Wales
regional,
one.
it's
Yeah, no,
it's national,
Yep, national.
all local
Okay.
government.
All states.
There's a program that's going to.
Yeah.
Is that what we're having?
There's always an opportunity to kind of, with the ones that we've been to before, is to meet with some federal politicians, which you do get some benefit out of. Yeah, it's probably a choice with the mayor and the general manager if they desire to want to go. Or
I'm
other
happy to
councils.
move the recommendation.
Moved by councillor McRae. Second by councillor Metcalfe. Any further questions or comments?
I do have one question. How much money is left in that budget?
Should be,
Should
the
be
budget
new
should be there
budget.
because we
No,
haven't.
no, it's in the June. It's going to
Still
be in
this
this year's
financial
budget.
year.
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, as you've reflected, there's been very little professional development training or conferences attended in this current financial year, predominantly due to restrictions around travel with COVID. So there is scope there to afford it, but also scope for other councillors to attend if they wish.
Is that line item already being carried forward into the next budget?
No, it won't get carried forward.
Go on the slush.
Lost.
No, I'm happy to move.
You're saving.
So we've moved and seconded. Any further questions? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 10.9, the draft industrial land strategy.
Murray.
You have those in your item.
What? Yep. So the draft industrial land strategy, the recommendation is that the council place the draft industrial land strategy on exhibition for a period of 28 days and receive a further report after that time detailing the outcome of the exhibition The background to the strategy was that it was identified in a number of regional and local strategies that a draft industrial land strategy needed to be prepared. That went out to tender in July 2019 and was finalised in 2020. And we've just got to the stage now that that's finalised and it needs to go on exhibition. A presentation of the strategy was also made to the councillors' workshop in April.
Any questions?
Add to that, Madam Chair, there's going to be some pretty proactive consultation. It'll be presented to the Developers Forum, which is being scheduled for 28th, I believe, 28th of April. And just trying to get press releases out there to get those who would be interested in an industrial land strategy to have a good look at the strategy, so that it's not just a bit of lip service around consultation.
Can I make a suggestion that this is emailed to all those invitees for that strategy meeting? So they've got time to look at it instead of just being on the day.
Yeah, there is a smaller overview report that could be provided, or we can obviously provide the whole strategy.
It might be useful to send out both the overview and the more detailed strategy for those that like delving into the detail.
Yes.
Yeah.
And particularly, I suppose, there was a lot of consultation done by the consultants with stakeholders, so they would probably like to see this before, and they would be likely to be attending the forum. So, yeah, sure.
Councillor
Madam Mayor, just find it a bit ironic that it's an industrial land strategy and the cover picture is of the town. Yeah, I think maybe we could have something a little bit more industrial on the front cover. But just a minute, it's an oxymoron.
Fair comment.
Straight off the bat, it shows how out of touch the consultants are with what they're charging to do.
Yeah.
No, it's ridiculous.
Any other questions or comments,
Think of
councillor?
relevant people.
Would somebody like to move the recommendation or move the motion? Move councillor McCrabb, seconded councillor Bull. All those in favour? Well done.
Environmental services report.
Okay, so the environmental services report is presented for environmental service activities for March 2021.
I'm happy to move.
Moved by councillor McCrabb. Second.
I can't second them. There, I've got a application in there, I think. It's been approved.
Conflict of interest?
Oh, not really. It's been already approved. It's 121 Lyndhurst Road, a 2-lot subdivision.
We'll get a second.
Not seen.
Second, councillor Walsh. Questions, comments? Councillor McCrabb.
Just got a question. I noted some parking fines. First question is, how much are they? Is there a variation around town about like the different levels of parking fines? And I couldn't find in the fees and charges where the parking fee fines were.
So that's through New South Wales Revenue. They set the fines, so the penalty units, I think it's either 220 or 320 for parking offences. There's not different levels.
Right.
The reasons that they were undertaken was we were receiving multiple complaints about parking in Whitelock Street. There's a fair bit of pressure in Whitelock Street, so this had been subject to previous discussions, and it's all day parking, but we allocated some parking bays to be 2-hour, and they were being exceeded consistently, and in the end, the only way to sort of try and get the word out there. So we started marking
Yep.
tyres for a while, but it was the same repeat offenders, so in the end.
Yep.
the issues and-
And has that had a desired effect?
No.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It has around those 2-hour parking spaces that were
Yeah.
created in order to try and increase turnover of parking in the area. So I know the ranger has followed that up, and I've just myself driving past there. In terms of overall Whitelock Street and the pressures in that area, they're still the same. So as a report done a little while ago to council, that when council moved forward with the 2-hour parking, was generally that it is a high use area, but every time inspections, investigations were undertaken, there was a small number of parking places, and also parking places available on adjoining Napier Street and areas like that. So again, with any parking area, like they can be full. It's because it's used as staff parking and supporting the CBD. So it's an area that has a lot of parking, just as the George Street off-street parking areas can get full. We've given an undertaking to the businesses in there to continue to monitor that, and also follow up on what seems to be overnight parking. And that's something that we don't feel is in keeping with the use of the area. So there are some things we can do in there, but it's the extra 2-hour places are working, but it's still an issue just in terms of pressure and being a high use area for parking.
Are the fines being paid?
That they are collected through Office of Revenue, so a lot of them into payment plans and things, but we're not required to chase them up, but they get paid through to us because they've got pretty high powers. They can freeze people's licenses, they can freeze their registration, so they get paid.
Yeah. So is there a cost to us for that?
We pay them an amount for undertaking that work,
So parking fees don't need to be listed in fees and charges on our operation?
No, because they're set by New South Wales Revenue.
Thank you.
So are they business owners or employees who are parking?
That's generally where we get the problem, where they're business employees. In this case, it was employees mainly, parking in them, so,
Just around that, like council with the rangers and that, it's a process in terms of any parking issues that, as Murray noted, investigating it, providing information, that this is, people are doing things that aren't keeping with the regulations, and that it's not just go straight there and out of the blue fine. Council definitely wants to work in with, because ultimately, as I say, they're businesses and they're business employees. So we do want to work in with them and just to try and change behaviour. And unfortunately, in some situations, as with general community, the only way you change behaviour is through that fining process. But we definitely look at opportunities and ways of managing it and dealing with it before we get to fines. It's a last resort for us to fine.
there's also a business there that has ample on-site parking, but we're still parking their cars out and taking up 6 or 7 spaces. So we've spoken to them, and now they've moved all their cars into their site. So anything we can, just try and free up some spaces.
I follow the logic there.
And
It's
there
just
is a
easy.
lot of parking in other areas like Napier Street, the other side of Whitelock Street. And
Correct, yeah.
not
That's a
like
change
people
of
then
habit.
have to walk half a kilometre to park their car and then get to work.
Any further questions on the environmental services report? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Is carried. Item 10.11, the draft sale yards.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So council's received the draft strategic plan from Urban Enterprises. This was discussed at the last the workshop, at the April workshop. Similar to just industrial land strategy in terms of process, in that it is a strategic plan, still a draft document, and we're recommending that council place the draft on exhibition for a period of not less than 28 days, so that timing can be much longer should council wish, and then to receive further reports regarding any comments that comes out of the exhibition period. The strategic plan builds on the issues and options paper that has been presented and discussed by council previously, where the discussions around different options and option 4 with that. So the option 4 has been included into the plan and discussed further in the strategic plan, as well as option 2 being works at the cattle yards. And now that's looking at 2A and 2B as being a minimum, and a more sort of work in there in terms of getting the whole cattle yards operating fully again. Just again note that this is like the budget, like the industrial land strategy, a recommendation to put it out on exhibition. Council, in the recommendations here, council aren't adopting a position. That will come once the exhibition period has been completed and the comments come back and incorporated into the documents to council.
You'll bring another report to council.
Yeah. Once we get the comments back, now we'll have a look at what those comments are, because generally you would get the comments back, we give them to the consultants who are putting together the document. They would incorporate it into the document and then come back to council. Based on comments that council may receive around the issue, given different community meetings and other discussions that have occurred, we'll look at whether those comments come back to council for council to sort of get a position around the comments before they're incorporated into the documentation. We don't want to be giving instructions to the consultant to go and put things into the document that when they come back, they're not positions or things that the council supports. So we'll sort of keep manage that process in terms of how best to incorporate comments into the document.
Thanks, Mark.
Mr Mayor, through you to
Councillor
Mark,
Betts.
can I?
That's okay.
Can I just, there's a recommendation there that we, we pursue option 4. It just says decision by Berrigan. Can we have that as Berrigan Shire Council?
Yes.
Please.
That's the way we are.
Yes, that's right. But I feel we need to say it's Berrigan Shire Council, not Berrigan.
Through Mr Mayor, there was a meeting called by Helen Dalton MP. Yesterday, yes, some of the proponents that are not happy with council signalling its intent back in November had requested that she facilitate a meeting in which the mayor and myself attended, and there was about 6 people who were still quite unhappy with the decision that council made back in November. It was important for us to reiterate that council had signalled an intent based on an options paper, and there was always a further decision to be made, which is around the strategy, see whether the strategy supported the intent that council made based on the option paper back in November. We have taken, I suppose, reiterated with the people who attended that meeting that this is seeking of feedback from them around all of the facts on the table in the strategy, and that those any pieces of feedback that are provided back to council will be taken into consideration before the adoption of the strategy for the sale yards. And they required longer consultation. They suggested 90 days. We told them that could present a problem in terms of coming up to the caretaker period prior to the election. But it does allow some flexibility around how long we consult with all of the stakeholders with regards to this. Because it says a period of not less than 28 days, so that doesn't put a limit on how long we can take. And we have very much trying to send a message out to all those who are interested in this decision to look at all of the facts that are presented in the strategy, because that's the only way we can get the right information in front of the council to adopt a reasonable approach to this, is to understand what all the facts are. Hopefully we will get some reasonable feedback. Just as an aside, we'll be sending out perhaps 10 or so printed copies to all of the agents who are involved in this, and also an electronic copy to make sure that they can pass it on to their clients and stakeholders as well, to get this promulgated as widely as possible.
So,
Councillor Foggy.
Just a question, Mr Mayor. At the meeting yesterday, was there anybody present other than yourselves and Helen who weren't an agent and staff?
So no,
So there's two people who would.
Amanda Barlow.
No.
She's a
Yes, it's
operator.
farmers.
Lindsay Parks.
Probably maybe not name them, but there were some people that were not agents.
Yes.
Present. Okay.
So they were producers, I suppose. is
Mm.
what
They're
we're meaning.
associated with them.
so what was the meeting? Was it, do you think council had a sympathetic ear, or was it pretty anti-decision?
Look, it's
Well,
fair.
Helen's an operator, livestock operator, and so you could,
And pretty.
and she was sympathetic to their concerns.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's within the bailiwick of a local MP to bring together concerns of their constituents. So that's just Ms Dalton doing her thing, doing her job really. But it was pretty clear that all the attendees of the meeting were on the side of not agreeing with the decision. And we took a little bit of time to explain that there is other people out there who may be in this space who do agree with the decision. So it was very much feedback from those who were against the decision that council has made.
Did they have any solutions?
No, much like we had a meeting some time ago.
so
I'll move the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Wallace,
I'll see.
I have a question, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McCracken.
A sympathetic local member usually has a checkbook in their hand.
that's all I was just going to say. She didn't come to any assistance to any funding.
She's got a checkbook.
She had a checkbook.
Okay.
She's not
I
paid us
have
to get a check.
I find this,
Might have her own personal checkbook.
I'm down at the option
Yes.
section
Shows the pictures.
601. I find it a little bit confusing. They've got option 2 is just the sheep yards. Like I've read it several times now, and I'm
That was option 2, was with nothing happening in Finland, I think, wasn't it?
no, option 2 is just the sheep yards, and they're talking 750,000 to 1.5 million, which like a range like that. I mean, I could have done that. So $750,000 range they've given us. However, and then option 2A is to do some work on the cattle yards.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Keep safety.
Yeah.
Yes.
The minimum requirements on the cat. So do we? I'm not sure. Can we do 2A and not 2?
Yes. Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the discussions with the consultants was just around the questions that came up with the cattle yards, and there's an opportunity to just have like a minimum, like one row of pens, or
Compliance,
do the whole
yeah.
thing. So in terms, the way they've put that together is The sheep yards part of option 2 is for both. So the original option 2 did include some
Mine works
small,
at cattle yards.
to both the sheep and the cattle yards. Discussions over time have really focused in on the cattle yards.
Yes.
So we've asked them to say, okay, for the cattle yards, rather than just give one figure, we would like them to split into what is a minimal and what is a more thorough. And around the more thorough has been the discussion around, well, making them presentable and to a point where sellers, producers would want to go there. There have been some questions raised around, well, if they were in better condition, we would be very happy and keen to sell there. And that's sort of the direction back to the consultant. So it's really option 2 around the sheep yards is for both. If council wants to move forward with the sheep yards. 2A and 2B are different sub options for the cattle yards.
They're all options.
They then haven't specifically identified option 3 or 4.
Oh, they did.
Major reinvestment and renewal, but they've just got 8.1.3. They haven't got option 3. So it's quite confusing for, if you're looking through, the heading's not there that says option 3 like it does for option 2A, 2A and 2B.
Yeah. So through Mr. Mayor, the way I've read that is option 1 is obviously business as usual. We just do nothing in terms of reinvestment. Option 2 is to make some improvements and upgrades to the sheep yards and either minor upgrades to get compliance to the cattle yards or the sheep yards and more substantial upgrades to the cattle yards. And then option 3 is major investment in both. Option 4 is obviously to split them apart and to divest.
Can I just
2A is an option and 2B is an option.
Yeah, can I just say the point I'm trying to make there? 2A and 2B, it's just a formatting thing, so it's easy to read. 2A and 2B are in blue as an option 2A or option 2, option 2A and option 2B. When you get down to option 3, it hasn't got the same format. It's got 8.1.3.
Yep.
They need to put those options in the same format so you can actually flick through and say, oh, this is option 4. And when you look at their preferred options, you can read that and then go back to the option that they're discussing. It is confusing.
Yeah.
And then,
That's why we have to pay these guys don't have the big bucks to do it.
Questions, comments? I think one of the things came out of yesterday's discussion was Finley versus Denny. That people who were there didn't think we should worry about Finley because now that Finley are reinvesting $1 million into the yards allegedly, that instead of closing, therefore flow through from Finley to allegedly Denny won't happen. So therefore that changes now. There was some couple of gentlemen there who had some interesting things to say. The cattle yards in Denny since December have had 2 sale yards. 2 days. 2 sales. I've got some information. What's happened at Finley is they haven't cancelled a sale yard, fortnightly sale yard in 2 years. So therefore they are having more consistent. And it's good information to know when you start to talk to these people about usage and frequency and in making your decision right.
We don't have the stock.
So, sorry, Councillor Betts.
So were they suggesting at the meeting yesterday, the reason they don't have cattle sales here is because of the state of the arts?
Numbers.
Numbers. That was an inference.
That's the drift we got at the meeting we had with.
Yes.
Inference behind the feedback from those people who are on that sort of line of argument is that if we had have reinvested, we wouldn't have these low numbers. With that being said, they've also acknowledged that it's been a poor environment over the last 4 or 5 years for cattle sales. So the numbers across the market have dropped, particularly with the drought and so forth. So.
And new type of selling, you know, online and all that.
So very
that's
critical of the
change around,
yards, but no
Georgia.
suggestions as to move forward how.
suggestion is to, council
Definitely,
just needs to invest.
definitely no.
Okay, and if we did
general fund.
invest, are they 100% going to guarantee then that they're going to find numbers and have sales?
No,
No,
no, dreaming.
Councillor Betts, the cattle numbers are not in. there.
Exactly, so I don't understand.
And neither's the dollars and cents in the general fund.
Well, there was
That's
two
just a
people
sign.
sitting in the room who had over 2,000 cattle each.
two different issues there. Pete.
What's the total,
That's
sorry?
already there.
2 seconds.
Councillor Crab.
I second it.
It sounds like
No,
a really
no,
don't.
no, you
Councillor
not.
Wallace moved, Councillor McCrab seconded.
Thought he was asking.
Any
a
further
question,
questions or
what
comments?
Yeah.
All we're doing is putting this out on public exhibition
Yes,
for a minimum of 28 days. We'll keep you informed if that
yes.
is required. Councillor McCrab.
Just, yeah, Mark said something about the submissions coming in, that we won't necessarily see those. Do you think?
Why
it is-
Sorry, Ms. Mayor. It's, yeah, more clarification around it because generally we'd have a strategic document on that and we get submissions, and then as staff, we would work through those submissions, talk with the consultant to get them into the document, and then you would see as council, you would see a completed document, but staff would highlight the submissions and why they've put in. So on a number of these ones, it can be a bit more of an automatic process with that, just to ensure that these projects continue to go on. Given the level of interest and the discussions and meeting that I've had previously, it's sort of my feeling, and talk with the general manager and mayor about it, that when we get the comments and submissions back, that we'll come to council with them a more thorough review of them, because as a staff, we don't want to be instructing the consultants on things that council ultimately won't support. It just.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah,
Process.
that's good.
It's
Good,
not the
good
consultant
process.
who's going to make the
No,
recommendation. We have to make
Exactly.
it.
It's council's.
Absolutely.
So this, you will be part of the process to wrap it up, whichever way we go.
That's it. Yeah.
Any further questions? I've moved and seconded. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 10.12.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the major projects program update for April 2021. Just highlight the councils with the attachment there. In the heading there, there's a reference there to February in the attachment. But this is the report that went up to the April AREC meeting. So it is a lot sort of recent information in February, so I apologise for that error. Just highlighting in the report the progress on a number of the major projects that council's undertaking. Maud Road is going well. They put the seal on it, that initial seal for the signature came on there yesterday, and still remains ahead of schedule. The civic precinct, the work is continuing on the civic precinct.
It just says there that the additional expenditure will greatly assist. Well, where's the additional expenditure coming from? We're coping that with.
For the civic precinct?
Yeah, for the visual audio.
Yep. So originally in the project was a provisional sum for the audio visual based on what the committees and architects and people involved coming up with. So in getting the pricing in on that, that has come out higher than that by the amount shown in the report, approximately $21,000. So at the project control group, we've had a discussion about that, of what it becomes a question of what council would be getting for that extra money and whether it's worthwhile. So that'd be coming out of the contingencies, and there's contingencies in the project for it. It was put to us that the additional money was covering additional light bars and lighting to allow for a higher value displays to be undertaken. Also
Oh, sure.
around
Yeah.
the screen, a better
Yeah.
screen to allow the shows and
Yep, no, I'm
Yeah,
happy,
so-
I'm happy
yeah,
with that. I can see where
I
you're coming
do-
from. I'm
yeah.
just worried that quite a few things like we discussed yesterday all seem to
yeah.
be above budget.
absolutely. So,
Sort of,
yeah, taken on board with this project, we've got the budgets and that, but it's also as a performance theatre, we want to ensure that it's as a facility, it's at that level that we want to meet what the business cases were around it. So,
yeah, no, fair enough.
and they are
Keep an eye
looking
on it.
Yep.
I always look to see what's non-green, and you've only got one item that's non-green.
Yeah, so
It's only little $10,000.
With that, and that's so we're working through with that. The non-green one being the truck stop. We're working out what we do with that, given that it was a change from that 400,000 back to just a very simple.
This is the way
strategic plan.
Davison Street.
Well, somewhere in town. We don't. That was part of the problem. We are, as staff, working through the projects and reporting. We are coming through a fair amount of milestone reporting and that with the end of Q3, a lot of them. So as staff come through there and changes to programs from milestone reporting and that, we hope to get that back into this report as well. So in terms of that, being green, completed, progressing on time, cost and quality. The cost and quality is fine. We're just talking with funding bodies around issues with time, whether extensions for projects are required or not.
Thanks, Mark. Any further questions? Councillor
Well, it's just a comment, Mr Mayor. In regards to the DNA netball courts, they look absolutely fantastic, the resurfacing, and the surface looks amazing. And I'm sure the players will get great enjoyment and certainly enhance safety because the drains are gone and the trip and yep, yeah. But whoever the contractor was, I know we waited a long time for them to come from Brisbane, but they've done a mighty job. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? We're going to move in a second. We have to.
Is the question, is the
Councillor Nico.
airport program, the 200 or 200 million, it just says here various fundings received, but we haven't used it, have we? Is that correct?
So in terms of the airport, we're still just working through.
Still sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, it's still sitting on the shelf. So we're reporting back to.
We've actually got that money, have we?
Yes,
2.5.
Yeah.
from the federal government,
In the bank.
and we're waiting for the other 2.5 from the state.
That's sitting on the shelf.
That's what I was wondering.
So when are we going to give that back?
Exactly right, because I was wondering if
At the moment.
we don't use it, we lose it.
Yeah, in terms of it,
We talked to
they're out
her
there.
about that yesterday, to see whether she can
Just a comment.
put any pods in.
managers confirmed we've actually physically received 1 million of that. That's in the bank. At the moment, with the work we're doing, there is a airport runway reserve that council has, which ultimately can cover the work we're doing at the moment. Given council's position on it, we would be reluctant without, a more definitive position to be spending that $1 million grant. So whilst we've got it, if different directions are taken, we definitely want to make sure that council's in a position just to change that.
Not that it's significant, but who keeps the interest?
Fantastic question.
First point was very perfect.
Not significant.
Yeah.
Just with that, we received $1 million. Is there an opportunity to go back to them and say, look, we're having a rethink of the whole project. We might look at a $2 million project, and for $1 for $1, would that be an opportunity to explore?
It's already been.
It isn't, yeah.
Discussed.
It might be
We've
just
already started
reworking
that,
our,
Susan.
reworking the actual, instead of
Don't
new,
lose the
reworking.
Yeah, yeah. So we're working through physically on the ground how that would look. So that's in terms of part of the project. We've got a 1,200 metre runway at the moment, an extension to 1,400 metres. Well, you know, an extension can be pulled out. We're revisiting in terms of the pavement strengths and that, and the likely aircraft. Do we need to have the pavement as strong? Because we could come to a point in the future if we wanted to improve it even further, we can just put something on the top. So there's sort of engineering things about it. But yeah, we're definitely looking at, well, if the funding doesn't come through, what would be a different looking project that, yeah, more to suit the immediate needs.
If you get support from the federal government.
Yeah,
That's
change it.
I don't think we'd have a problem with that.
That came out at the last workshop. I think you were away.
Okay.
We just discussed with Mark what are the options and what's the absolute minimum required for the air ambulance. 'Cause that's basically the main thing we want to keep going. And that's what Mark's looking into for us to see what that then costing on that as opposed to what we've got in the plan.
All right, no further questions on the progress report? Need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Metcalfe, seconded by Councillor Crabb. No further questions or comments? All those in favour? Against? Carried. 10.13, the operations update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the discussions at previous meetings and workshops around that, council gets an excellent environmental services report and getting information around the operations and infrastructure areas and providing ongoing reports on that. So been working with the teams to provide a report around the works and that are being undertaken in operations. You'll see that there's a tabled report with a bit more detail around roads and weeds. So at this point in time, it's getting the information to council, which we definitely want to do. But then I think through future workshops and that discussions around what information and what format and that the council want in terms of these update reports from infrastructure.
Did we seal the Maud Road yesterday?
That is, yeah, my understanding. I was about the only person who didn't go up there and see it. Chasing people yesterday, and everyone was like, "Can't, I'm going to Maud Road." So, but yeah, my understanding that went well. We're looking at sealing the work out at Finley Road, and my understanding we're putting a hold on that just with conditions and that. So that may be a go.
So is that all of Maud Road we're doing this financial year?
We're looking with the pavement work to continue.
All right.
So it's weather dependent, but a lot of the work we can just continue.
Yep.
Keep going.
Councillor Craig.
Mr. Mayor, Mark, just what is the time frame? We've got, this will be the 3rd kilometre starting now. 6 kilometres to do in total or 8?
Yeah.
So eight kilometres to do in total.
What is the time frame?
So the time frame with how we're going with it would be, I'd be expecting we'd be working up until Christmas with that. So the funding is to June next year.
Right.
And the programming we've given them is sort of into March 22, but at the moment we're...
And you'll just keep going with that. And is there any fatigue with a team going for, like, with that extra travel and longer hours? Do they need to? I mean, I know it's a cost to relocate plant.
Yeah, not that's been raised with me at the moment, but it's a good point because especially in as we move into the middle of winter, I'd be quite happy to bring them off that for a month or two, and probably a discussion around this in terms of maintenance, getting them to do other things.
Yes.
So that's something we'll
just a bit of a
monitor.
change.
Whilst they've got their they've got their processes, their methodologies are going really well at the moment. So whilst there's that sort of.
You're certainly, when I've been there, the morale's been very high.
Yeah,
They seem to be
so
enjoying the work.
We'll better keep an eye on that.
You're suggesting you fly them up and back each day, or?
Probably doing a few trips.
Camp in Pete's Quarter.
Just a change, or, you know, there's obviously a couple of resheeting jobs and things up there.
Yeah,
too.
there's
Yeah,
some other
on
ones
the-
in the area.
Look, it's a comment and a question. Just with the works that were done sort of externally for the play on the plains, the driver of the water truck, because I was on parking and out there for the day, the driver on the water truck was really to be congratulated. He did a mighty job and was one of the best PRs for council that we could have had. And most people commented what a terrific job he did. So if that can be passed on, Mark,
Absolutely.
because,
I don't know who it was, but.
you know, of course, the truck's got Edward River splashed all
There's your
over it.
opportunity, Mark. That was
And
me that
people
day.
were very complimentary of the job that he did.
I thought you were going to say he splashed people.
Not like what has happened previously at 5 o'clock in the morning on a freezing cold morning, no. And my other question is, in the Waring Gardens, what's happening with the approaches to the bridge?
So we've, as part of the work, the contractors to do is to provide more panels on either side. They weren't in the original scope there, and then we felt for safety reasons we at least needed to have one more panel there, because once you pass that panel, and they're the wooden panels now, so we determined that we needed the wooden panels there for safety reasons, so we could open up the bridge with some comfort that people aren't going to go off the edge. But those panels are definitely sort of being manufactured. I think they'd only be 1 to 2 weeks
Okay.
away. but
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
panels.
Yeah,
Just
thanks, Mark.
while we're talking about the Waring Gardens,
The thing.
the alcohol restriction zones signs, they still have the old Deniliquin logo on them. Can we get some updated Edward River ones, please?
Yes, that's
I thought
underway.
we talked about that recently.
Yeah,
Been identified a few
it's
times.
very much chasing that.
And so we've done an audit of all the signs, and we just got to reduce them and put them up.
We'll try again, Norm.
For you, Mr Mayor, just the last comment for me for today is, since joining council in 2001, my pet hate has been the misspelling of Berubin. And I see it's been raised. It's here again on the supplementary report, right? Not sure who did that, but
Okay.
So how do you spell it?
Better get it
Something
from
if you don't look it up yourself, you'll
How
never
do you
learn.
spell it?
Where is
Just
it?
tell us how you spell it.
Where is it?
It's just been repainted, didn't you say? Isn't it?
Double O-R, double O-R.
OOR, yes. Yeah. So I apologise for that, and we'll discuss that with
Send the memo out.
Hey, Shire.
Spell check.
people who
Hey,
should know
Sean.
better.
It's automatic non-payment of rates if it happens out there. People, especially if it comes on your rate notice like that.
Councillor Wallace.
Now, could I just ask, the 200 megs of water pumped from the treatment plant, that's per month? That's this.
That would have been, yeah, for the month. So
Yeah.
that's what we're looking
So
at.
how would we be tracking for the year? Well, you could take that on notice.
Yeah, I'll take that on notice. Generally, discussions, my feeling is we're sort of low to normal. We definitely haven't any drivers that would have had excessive use. It's been, to a point, it's been a mild summer. So that so we'll look at that as being the monthly and a year to date figure. Yeah.
So no thought's ever been given to building a storage to store what we don't use for reuse in the following year?
The 2000,
That's new capital works.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Harbour Bridge.
Yeah,
Well, that's what Griffith is doing.
yeah,
Potential.
Yeah.
To sell water.
yeah.
No, well, You've
Well,
got
then it
golf
becomes
clubs
ours
and
to
you've
sell.
We're not
got
allowed to sell the water.
race clubs
If
and
if
people
we
that want
we
it.
pump it in, it comes
So-
out.
Yes.
With our usage compared to what our town high security, that's, you know, that's
So
not
well and truly
not a driver. And also the setup in terms of the weir behind Memorial Park. So there's that old weir behind Memorial Park. The
Yes.
weir pool upstream of that is which is feeds or where we get the supply for the town out of is actually a very secure supply as well. So at this point in time, and we'll have the opportunity as we go through the strategic, the integrated water cycle management to revisit that. But at the moment, with a high license and a very secure weir pool, we wouldn't need to look at any off-stream storage.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the operations update?
But just a little bit off left field, but Councillor Betts wanted that fleet program looked at. Is that sort of underway?
Adding that into the operational plan
Yeah.
to be undertaken.
Thank you.
Can I just ask the carpenter that was recruited, are they a qualified carpenter or do they even have to be qualified? Is there such a definition as a qualified carpenter?
My understanding, there is a definition of a qualified carpenter. Generally, in council staff, they don't need to be qualified, trade qualified in any area, because we're working with council assets, and that where we have changes to that is with mechanics and also with plumbers. So we have 2 trade qualified plumbers which assist us in that. So I'll take on notice with the carpenter. I'm well aware that he's very experienced in that sort of
So,
area.
yeah, it was just more around the
but-
risks. You
Yeah,
do building
so-
maintenance and inspections. Does that create a risk for us if they're not qualified?
It doesn't create any additional risk for council beyond that. Council has the risk of someone undertaking that activity, whether they have that qualification or not. So it comes back to us as we've got to be comfortable with that.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor McCred, the recommendation. We note the report. Seconded by Councillor Ball. Any further questions or comments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now that finishes the meeting, so I'd like to close. And thank you all for attending our April meeting. But now I've been told that we need to go into councillors' questions and also the matter that we're going to do.
Yes, so a number of questions.
We're
just-
offline now, so.
Yeah. So you close the meeting and then we can have a discussion.